All right, you magnificent bastards, welcome back to the deep dive.
Back at it again.
Today we're going balls deep into the Ottoman military.
Hell yeah.
You wanted the lowdown on these legendary warmongers and chucked a stack of Wikipedia articles our way.
A stack indeed.
So buckle up, Buttercup, because we're about to blast through centuries of badass warriors, insane tactics, and some seriously fucked up shit.
Oh yeah.
To help us sift through this historical clusterfuck, we've got our resident brainiac ready to drop some knowledge bombs.
It's going to be a wild ride full of twists and turns you wouldn't believe.
All right, so let's cut the crap and get down to brass tacks.
Let's do it.
These guys started out as your typical horseback riding, ass-kicking nomads in the 1300s, right?
Pretty standard stuff for the time.
Pretty standard stuff.
But what set them apart was their ability to adapt and evolve under Osman and Orhan. They transitioned from a ragtag bunch of raiders to a paid standing army. This was a massive game changer back then, giving them a level of organization and discipline that their enemies lacked.
So they were like the early adopters of military organization, like the fucking apple of warfare.
Exactly. And get this, they were also early adopters of gunpowder technology.
Really?
We're talking cannons and firearms way before most of Europe even knew what gunpowder was.
They were blasting the shit out of people while the rest of the world was still playing with swords and arrows.
That's right.
No shit, they were blowing stuff up before Europe even knew what hit them.
Yeah.
That's fucking wild.
And it's one of the reasons they were so successful early on. They used their cannons to devastating effect at the Siege of Constantinople in 1453.
Constantinople.
Imagine being a defender on those walls and seeing those massive cannons rolling up. You'd be shitting your pants.
I bet they were pissing their chainmails. Those walls had stood for centuries, and then, boom, the Ottomans come in with their big-ass guns and blow them to smithereens.
Yeah, the fall of Constantinople was a major turning point in history, and those cannons played a crucial role.
For sure.
And speaking of big-ass guns, have you heard of the Dardanelles gun?
Sounds like some kind of sex toy, but go on.
This monster cannon was built in 1464 and was still being used over 300 years later to blow holes in British ships during the Dardanelles campaign in World War I.
Holy shit, that's some serious firepower. These guys weren't messing around, but weren't they also famous for their elite fighting force, the Janissaries?
Oh yeah, the Janissaries.
Weren't they like the Navy SEALs of the Ottoman Empire, but with way more facial hair?
The Janissaries were the backbone of the Ottoman military for centuries. They were an elite infantry force, fanatically loyal to the Sultan and known for their discipline and ferocity in battle. And yes, those beards were legendary.
All right, spill the beans.
Yeah.
How did they create this badass army of bearded badass?
Well, their origin story is pretty fucked up.
Oh.
They were Christian boys, mostly from the Balkans, who were taken from their families, converted to Islam, and trained from a young age to be soldiers.
Wait, hold the phone. They kidnapped Christian
Yeah.
kids, brainwashed them, and turned them into killing machines. Talk about a fucked up childhood.
It was a brutal system, no doubt about it, but it was also incredibly effective. These boys were completely indoctrinated with no ties to their past or their families. They were raised to be soldiers and nothing else.
So they were basically child soldier slaves.
Basically.
Fucked up.
Yeah.
But I guess it explains why they were so loyal and ruthless.
And they were at the forefront of military innovation.
Okay.
They were one of the first standing armies to fully embrace firearms by the 16th century. They were using muskets and developing tactics for volley fire, which gave them a significant advantage on the battlefield.
So they were like the Terminator of the 16th century, marching in formation, blasting away with their muskets and those badass beards flowing in the wind.
They were a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure, but like all powerful institutions, they eventually became corrupt and resistant to change.
Ah, so they went from being lean, mean fighting machines to bureaucratic asshats, more interested in protecting their own asses than kicking ass on the battlefield.
You could say that their corruption and unwillingness to modernize eventually led to their downfall.
All right, so the Janissaries went from heroes to zeros. What's next on this roller coaster ride through Ottoman military history? What other crazy shit did these guys get up to?
We've got plenty more crazy shit to talk about, don't you worry.
So the Janissaries went from badass warriors to a bunch of corrupt ass-kissing bureaucrats.
It happens.
Sounds like a classic case of power corrupting, and an absolute power corrupting, absolutely. But what about the rest of the Ottoman military?
Yeah.
What the hell happened to them? Did they just go to shit along with the Janissaries?
Well, it's not that simple. The decline of the Ottoman military was a complex process that spans centuries.
Okay.
It was a combination of factors, including internal struggles,
Right.
economic woes, and a failure to keep up with the rapid advancements in European military technology.
So basically, they got complacent and lazy while the rest of the world was catching up and surpassing them. Classic case of resting on your laurels, right?
Pretty much, the Ottomans had a long and glorious history of military success, and that can breed a sense of arrogance and invincibility. They became stuck in their old ways while European powers were embracing radical new ideas and technologies.
It's like they were still rocking muskets and cannons while the Europeans were rolling out with machine guns and tanks.
Yeah.
No wonder they got their asses handed to them.
They failed to invest in research and development while their rivals were pouring resources into military innovation. They also had a lot of internal problems like political instability and corruption, which further weakened their military capabilities.
So it was a perfect storm of fuck-ups, a crumbling empire from within, unable to compete with the rising powers from without.
But surely they must have tried to modernize at some point. I mean, even the dumbest asshat can see when the writing is on the wall.
Oh, they definitely tried. There were numerous attempts at reform throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. Sultan Selim III, for example, tried to create a new modern army called the Nizam-i-Seated.
He brought in European advisors, adopted new training methods, and even tried to introduce new weapons and uniforms.
So he was trying to give the Ottoman military a much-needed makeover. Did it work?
Unfortunately, no. His reforms were met with fierce resistance from conservative elements within the empire, particularly the Janissaries.
Ugh, those guys again.
They saw any attempt at modernization as a threat to their power and privileges.
Those bearded bastards. So even when the Sultan was trying to drag the military kicking and screaming into the modern era, he had his own troops stabbing him in the back.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. The Janissaries staged a revolt and overthrew Selim III, putting an end to his reforms. It was a major setback for the Ottoman military, and it highlighted the deep-seated resistance to change within the empire.
So it's like trying to teach an old dog new tricks, except in this case, the old dog is a bunch of pissed-off Janissaries with scimitars, and a serious case of, we've always done it this way, seems like, what a clusterfuck.
It was a difficult situation. The Ottoman Empire was a vast and complex entity with a long history and deeply entrenched traditions. Change was never going to be easy.
Well, it sounds like they were fucked from the start, but they did make some progress, right? They didn't just give up and let the world pass them by.
They did make some progress. Eventually, they established a military academy, adopted some European training methods, and even had a brief flirtation with aviation in the early 20th century.
Wait, the Ottomans had airplanes? Now, that's something I didn't expect. They're dropping bombs on camels or something?
Not quite. Their air force was relatively small and underdeveloped, but it did see some action in the Balkan Wars and World War I.
Well, at least they tried.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it wasn't enough to save them from the inevitable, right?
Sadly, no. The Ottoman Empire entered World War I woefully unprepared for the scale and intensity of modern warfare. Their outdated tactics and equipment were no match for the industrialized armies of Europe. They fought bravely, but they were outmatched and outgunned.
And so the once mighty Ottoman military was relegated to the dustbin of history. What a tragic end to such a long and storied legacy.
It is a tragedy, but it's also a cautionary tale. Even the most powerful empires can fall if they fail to adapt and evolve. The Ottomans were a force to be reckoned with for centuries, but their inability to modernize ultimately sealed their fate.
Well said, well said. But let's not dwell on the doom and gloom. Let's shift gears and explore some of the more curious and bizarre aspects of the Ottoman military. I mean, we've already talked about soup servers, French advisors, and even a brief stint with airplanes. What other oddities lie hidden in the annals of Ottoman military history?
Oh, there are plenty more where those came from. Their recruitment methods, for example, were pretty unique, to say the least. They had this system called devshirme.
Devshirme sounds like some kind of exotic sex move.
Not quite, though. I'm sure someone out there has tried to make it one. Essentially, it was a system of forced conscription where they would take Christian boys from conquered territories, convert them to Islam, and train them for military or government service.
Hang on, they were basically building their army and bureaucracy out of kidnapped kids. Sounds pretty messed up, even for the Ottomans.
It was a complex system with both brutal and pragmatic aspects. On the one hand, it's straight up child abduction on the other. These boys were often given opportunities they would never have had otherwise. Some rose to the highest ranks of the military and government.
So it was like a fucked up lottery, where the prize was potentially becoming a powerful vizier, but the cost was your childhood and your entire cultural identity.
Yeah, pretty much sums it up. It's definitely one of those historical quirks that makes you scratch your head and say, what the fuck were they thinking?
Well, it definitely makes for a more interesting story than just, oh, they had a regular army. Speaking of interesting stories, what about those crazy siege tactics? I heard they were masters of bringing down walls.
Oh, absolutely. We already talked about those badass cannons at Constantinople, but they had a whole arsenal of tricks up their sleeves. They'd dig tunnels under walls, build massive siege towers, and even use catapults to fling all sorts of nasty shit over the ramparts.
Nasty shit like, what, disease, rats, bags of poop?
Plus, they were known to use things like beehives burning pitch, and even the bodies of plague victims talk about psychological warfare.
Jesus Christ. That's some savage shit.
Ah!
They were ruthless, weren't they? But hey, when you're fighting for an empire, I guess all's fair in love and war, right? Still, those defenders must have been shitting bricks when they saw a giant beehive hurtling towards them.
Yeah.
But all this talk of brutality and bizarre tactics, it makes you wonder, do they have any sort of code of honor, or were they just straight up barbarians?
That's a great question, and the answer is it's complicated. They certainly had a strong warrior culture with a heavy emphasis on loyalty, courage, and discipline. But like any military force, there were instances of cruelty and barbarity. A war is a messy business no matter what era you're talking about.
True, but it's not all doom and gloom, is it? Didn't they also have some pretty kick-ass music? I mean, those Ottoman military bands are legendary, right?
Ah, yes, their military bands were legendary, loud, boisterous, and full of energy. They even influenced the development of European military music.
So we can thank the Ottomans for those annoyingly catchy marching band tunes who knew.
Indeed, they brought a whole new level of swagger to the battlefield. Just imagine those Janissaries marching in formation, beards flowing in the wind with a thumping Ottoman beat driving them forward.
What a sight that must have been. I'm starting to think we need to do a whole episode just on Ottoman military music. But for now, let's wrap this bad boy up. What are some key takeaways for our listeners, beside the fact that the Ottomans were a bunch of crazy motherfuckers with a penchant for soup and bees?
Well, I think their story is a reminder that even the most powerful empires are not invincible. They can rise to great heights through innovation and military prowess, but they can also fall just as quickly if they fail to adapt to the changing world around them.
Word, and let's not forget that history is never black and white. Even the most brutal empires can have moments of brilliance and innovation. The Ottomans were a complex and fascinating bunch, that's for sure. All right, motherfuckers, let's wrap up this deep dive into the Ottoman military. We've covered a lot of ground from their early days as badass nomadic warriors to their eventual downfall.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Talked about cannons, janissaries, soup servers, French advisors flying beehives, and even kidnapped kids turned into elite soldiers.
Quite the mix.
What the fuck else is there to say about these guys?
Well, we could talk about their navy.
The Navy.
Which was a major force in the Mediterranean for centuries, or their logistical challenges in managing such a vast empire, or their impact on military architecture and engineering.
Hold up, their Navy. Weren't these guys mostly known for their land-based armies?
It's a common misconception.
I thought they were all about horses and camels and charging across the steppes.
The Ottomans had a powerful navy that controlled much of the Mediterranean Sea for centuries.
No shit.
They challenged Venetian dominance, battled the Spanish and Portuguese, and even raided coastal towns as far north as Ireland.
Holy shit. Ottoman pirates raiding Ireland. That's some next-level shit. What were they thinking trying to steal Guinness from the Irish?
Well, they were after more than just beer. They were looking for loot, slaves, and strategic advantages. Their naval power was crucial to their expansion and control of trade routes.
So they weren't just landlubbers, after all. They were a force to be reckoned with on both land and sea. Damn, these guys were ambitious, but what about those logistical challenges you mentioned? I mean, managing an empire that stretched from North Africa to the Middle East must have been a logistical nightmare.
Oh, it was a massive undertaking. They had to move troops, supplies, and information across vast distances, often through hostile territory. They developed sophisticated systems of communication, transportation, and supply chains to keep their empire running smoothly.
So they were like the Amazon Prime of the 16th century, delivering death and destruction with speed and efficiency.
Something like that.
Crazy.
They also had a profound impact on military architecture and engineering. They were master builders constructing fortresses, bridges, and aqueducts that still stand today.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of those Ottoman fortresses. They're fucking impressive. Built like tanks.
They were designed to withstand sieges, and they incorporated innovative features like layered defenses, interlocking fields of fire, and underground tunnels.
So they were basically the masterminds of medieval military engineering. Damn, these guys were good. But you know what? I'm starting to feel like we've only scratched the surface of this topic. There's so much more to explore, so much more to learn.
Absolutely. The Ottoman military is a rich and fascinating subject, full of surprises and contradictions. We could spend hours talking about their tactics, their weapons, their culture, their impact on the world.
You know, we should do a whole series on these crazy bastards.
I'd be down for that.
All right, you magnificent bastards, you heard it here first. Stay tuned for more deep dives into the Ottoman military.
We'll be back with more stories, more insights, and more mind-blowing historical facts.
Until then, peace out, and don't forget to brush your beards.